The Army's a place that is a land of opportunity. If you had 1 hour before your soldiers went to combat, what would you train on?
I figure there's no better person to talk about readiness with, and I want to kind of throw out some definitions. So Congress, they define readiness as the ability of military forces to fight and meet the demands of assigned missions. The Army says that readiness is the ability to defeat, deny, or deter hybrid, near-peer threats and meet operational demand requirements. And then the Army says there's 4 pillars when we talk about readiness: manning, training, equipping, and leader development. And I want to break all those out with you here today. But before we get there, I want to start with your definition. When you think about readiness, what does it mean to you?
You know, individual readiness, we'll start with that because that's most important, is when a soldier themselves feel capable to be able to accomplish their mission. That's easily said, right? But when you build self-confidence down at the individual level, and that's, you know, you got to do collective training, but when soldiers know they're ready, like what we talked about in our unit, I honestly believe our soldiers knew they were ready. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. We're going to unpack that during this podcast, but because it builds the confidence and the capability of that individual soldier, which then builds the team and the squad and the platoon and the company, and it just keeps going. And it takes hard work, dedication, precision. You know, we talk about 10,000 hours to become a professional. And imagine how many hours those young soldiers put in before we went to Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's easy to write on paper and put on a training schedule, but it's difficult to execute, as we well know.
Well, I remember my first day there, and Colonel Martindale brought me in the office and he said, "We're going to Iraq in 5 months." And I'm like, "Well, that's a long time." And thinking in my head. And then he went on, certainly I didn't say it, but he went on to talk about how we had no time. And how every minute was going to have to be spent. There couldn't be any standing around, waiting around. There couldn't be any, delay. We'll do it tomorrow. And I remember we would have those times, because you get to do these fun things in the infantry a lot, where it's like waiting on the word in the afternoon, waiting to be told to go home. And we wouldn't sit in the hallway. We'd be outside. We'd be clearing the barracks with, our hands up as
put some engineer tape on the ground, enter clear building drills. Yeah, absolutely. We talk about that all the time, about how much time there is for training. And one of the things I used to do as the SMA was go out to PCC every month and talk to the new battalion commanders, brigade commanders, and their sergeant majors. And the challenge was, how do we get after the things we need to do to be ready? And with all the competing efforts that go on in the Army, all the training requirements that are not necessarily combat focused, and all the things that we are told to do and direct our subordinate leaders to do. And I used to tell them, describe them like this: if you had 1 hour before your soldiers went to combat, what would you train on? And then all you got to do is just back it up. If you had 2 hours and 3 hours and 4 days or 5 days or 6 days, those are the things you're supposed to be doing in order to make your soldiers mission capable and ready to fight and win, and give them the individual courage and competence and capability to do the mission.
I'm always reminded of Special Operations Forces truths, right? We call them values, we call them truths. But number 4, because when I left you, that's where I went. So I got to spend the rest of my career in SF. But I will say that, nothing against a lot of the SF guys I served with, we had guys in 4th ID and 1-8 who were equal, if not better than some. And I shouldn't say that on the Green Beret Podcast, but I'll tell you that.
The truth is, we have phenomenal soldiers everywhere. I mean, there are really, really good soldiers throughout our Army. Yeah. I mean, there's some superheroes throughout the Army. We see that. Now, one of the best examples is when you run the Best Warrior competition. Mm-hmm. One of the things I got to do when I became an ACOM and the SMA, and you're getting an individual soldier that could be a food specialist, or an Army Reserve soldier, one that just dominated the competition. Incredible capability, tactical, and you wouldn't think that, right? Because they only train 1 weekend a month. But some of these soldiers that we have, it makes you want to come to work every day.
Yeah, they surprise you. You got to empower them. But I mean, so the Special Operations Force truth number 4 says competent, soft, let's say units, right? Mm-hmm. Competent units can't be created after emergencies occur.
Yeah.
And when we talk about readiness, why is it so important to be proactive, and how do we as leaders look down the road? Because we got to understand the operational environment today, but we got to know where is it going to be. And at every level, whether we're at the strategic level as the SMA, or you're at a more operational level, maybe you're at a brigade or a corps, or a tactical level in a platoon or a company, how do you now start to think about, how do I understand what's happening today and where my unit needs to be tomorrow?
Yeah, this is a great question. One of the things we have done with 100% accuracy since the formation of this great organization we call the U.S. Army is predicted where we're going to fight next wrong every time.
Every single time.
Well, that's right. And that's what makes it so hard, right? We grew up in an Army. I shouldn't say you grew up in the Army. I was halfway through my career when we met. But I grew up in the Army where it was completely different focus, high-intensity conflict, near-peer adversaries, and then we switched to counterinsurgency, right? We changed the entire way we trained, the entire Army, to fight in Afghanistan and Iraq. And now we're back to a different set of readiness. Now we're back to focus on near-peer capability again, right? Conventional warfare. But we can't forget the lessons we learned over 20 years of unconventional warfare because, like I said, where we're going to fight next, who knows? That's the difficult with being ready. A lot of the tasks cross lines. I mean, a soldier's got to know how to shoot the rifle, regardless of what combat situation they're in. But how you fight, how you organize, how you train and equip your men and women to fight in a high-intensity conflict versus unconventional or conventional warfare, completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different. There's a whole set of tasks. So it starts with setting priorities from the top, right? What's the focus of the Army? What are we focusing on? What is the strategic capabilities? And how does it support the national defense strategy?